So this is David Nagel opening the session, work session on HB 54, allowing alternative treatment centers to operate for profit. So, welcome everybody. I think for the most part, the big concerns about this bill was not content or what we wanted to accomplish with it. It was two things that I heard, and Representative Woods, you're happy to chime in if I'm missing something, but one of them was, do we agree or disagree on the concept of the bill? Which I don't think there was that much disagreement on. The next concern was, um, um, this is not the first time this bill has come up. It's always hit a wall at the governor's office. Is there a way that we can look at this bill in a manner to get it, in a form that the governor can support? The third was, the concern that big cannabis would take over. And there was a fourth one that I can't remember what I was thinking about. Feel free to chime in if you have any thoughts, but that's kind of where we were. And the concept was to look through this bill and make sure that I think all our ducks were in a row before we went forward. Since Representative Kofalt brought up some very good issues, and it's going to be important that we hear what he has to say. With that said, I did have some concerns that I wish that the folks in the audience could address, and I think I know the answers to these questions, but I really want to hear it from you. My big concern is that this is a unique entity, and I want to make sure that the oversight is still the same as it was before. Is that accurate? So it's still 126X oversight, that doesn't change at all? Right. I don't have any problems. Why, I mean, this is a little problematic because we're not the ones that had the concerns, and we wanted this work session so that all those concerns could be resolved, and until that person's here, it's kind of hard to know what to say.
But you mentioned the governor's objection.
Yes, why don't you go ahead? Yeah, maybe, since we're live, I guess we do need to speak into the microphone. Were you the sponsor?
I am the sponsor.
Thank you.
I don't have my tags on, I'm sorry. For the record, I am Representative Wendy Thomas, representing the town of Merrimack. You had mentioned governor's objections. Do you know what those are?
With this
Specific-
governor, no.
Yeah,
But my understanding is that the past concerns were, where this would lead to. I mean, you would know better than me, Matt, what the concerns were.
Mr. Chair,
He's here, yay.
my take,
He's got icicles from his nose, sorry.
my take is that there's been a push on the state side to be state-run. And they're looking at from the economic perspective, and they would like to run it. At least that's been the perspective in years past.
from what I understand, though, the state run is for adult use. And
That would be up for consideration
Yeah.
how it's worked out.
I see what
But,
you're saying, yeah.
I think
Okay.
that was a factor that came into play, at least. I don't know about last session, but when I was in the House before, that was one of the concerns.
No, it was last session too.
Yeah,
Yeah. I am going to defer to the people who actually run the dispensaries because they'll give you more information. I just wanted to see if we could list the governor's possible objections so that we can speak to those. But I'm going to defer to other speakers.
Just to bring you up to speed, we just started. And what we were looking at, number one is, are there concerns with this bill's conceptually? If not, structurally, and the concerns that I've heard, number one was objections potentially from the governor that might block this. Historically, that's been a problem. And secondly, the other concern that I heard was the fear that this would lead to like big cannabis taking over. And there was a third concern that I just don't remember what it was. And I'd just be really, curious, like, what your thoughts, concerns, whatever are, and then we want to hear more about the governor.
And I'm not aware of what the governor's position is on this.
So you're aware we're streaming live.
I understand.
Oh.
And so, first of all, I'd like to apologize to everyone for being late. I ran into more traffic than I expected this morning. So yeah, my concern is primarily the second one that you mentioned, which is, I certainly have no issue with companies making a profit. My concern is creating an environment in which you have a combination of profit motive and a high degree of regulation, which I think is a recipe for bad policy, anti-competitive practices, and something that ultimately harms consumers. In this case, understanding that consumers are sort of a very specific market, if I can use that word, that are trying to address very specific health problems. So I would like to see us come up with solutions that expand access to care, expand availability. But that is sort of the root of my concern is, does this create that kind of environment where people who have very, very different motives sort of swoop in and turn things in a different direction based on different incentives?
I think I totally understand what you're saying, because monopolization in healthcare is a huge problem. And if I'm understanding you correctly, that's your concern, is that you're going to create large entities that will crowd out the small entities. Is that correct?
Not only that they will crowd out the smaller entities, but that they ultimately will function in a way that does not serve the people that we're trying to help here.
Boy, we're on the same page on stuff. Thanks. You've just made my day with that statement. The folks in the audience could address the design of the bill, how it would address that, and what your thoughts are about that. Because, I mean, to me, it's a legitimate concern.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
It was my understanding, and disclaimer, I was on the board of Temescal before they were actually operational. And then when I got in the head of legislature, I demurred and left the board. But it was my understanding that no other ATCs would be allowed in the state. And as a consequence, that was part of the current regulation. My understanding was that would not change. I didn't see anything here that said this is open. In other words, the rule would still stay that if somebody wanted to come to the state, it would have to be by changing legislation. It would not be just making it for profit, would not open it to everybody, Tom, Dick, and Harry, that came across the border. Please help me if I've misunderstood, but that was my understanding of what this would do, and not allow it to be opened. And maybe the folks here,
I put you on the spot on purpose, Mr. Simon.
Mr. Chairman, before he begins, may I sort of say, in addition to what Dr. Nagel requested, I guess I'm looking for comments on the sort of the root problem, because the root problem, as I heard it, has to do with financing, obtaining financing at a reasonable cost. And then I'll just say that I know considerably less about medical marijuana and ATCs than my colleagues up here. And so I may at times ask you to dumb it down for me a little bit so that I can more clearly understand how things operate and the challenges that you're facing.
Can I just say one more thing too? Because I think we're looking at two separate issues. You raised an issue of access in terms of number of dispensaries, but the other big issue is, how do you survive? How do you obtain financing? And to me, that's what this bill is about. It's not about what you just said, and that may be a separate issue. And if I'm wrong, please let me know.
Thank you, representatives. For the record, Matt Simon, Granite Leaf Cannabis. We have people behind me who are more knowledgeable on the business aspects. So I want to not talk a whole lot, but I wanted to address a couple of the high level issues that came up. So when this bill first passed, the political environment was very difficult. We had a bill in 2009 that would have created one dispensary, like a true monopoly. And the governor vetoed that bill, and we were 2 votes short of overriding the veto to pass that. So 4 years later, we got the current law passed, allowing 4 ATC licenses, and the thought of having more than 4 would have been politically unthinkable in that time, because the opposition was portraying everything as, you know, a massive, we're opening Pandora's box. We're always opening Pandora's box with any cannabis bill. So there was no appetite for more licenses than that at the time. It wasn't a crony business lobbying thing, because there were no businesses to be lobbying. It was setting up a policy from scratch. Since then, as the program has developed and as patients have said, we don't have enough access. At first, there could only be 4 dispensaries. So a number of years ago, the legislature added the ability for each ATC to operate a second dispensary location. So now we have a total of 7 dispensaries. We can have 8 by law, but there can't be more than 8. And the legislature has never had a bill that would allow new companies to come into this space. So I've been asked that a number of times, and I've always said that, you know, we wouldn't oppose that. You know, patients in other states have lots of options. If you're in Maine or Vermont or Massachusetts, there are dozens of companies, if not hundreds, that are participating in a market. And if one company can't produce a product perfectly, somebody else can. You just buy it from them, and everything is much more efficient, and patients have access to the products they need as part of a market. So are we open to that? I think the answer is absolutely yes, but we haven't seen a bill on that. So the question, this often gets tied up in the debate of recreational cannabis and things like that. I think that's extremely unfortunate, because the people sitting behind us, we have a mission. It's service to patients. We don't know if legalization is going to pass in 2 years or 10 years or ever. We have a law that is set up in such a way that it does not allow us to fulfill our mission the way it should be fulfilled. We're struggling on those levels. So I want to let Keenan and Brandon behind me talk more about how this has negatively impacted the businesses and by extension the patients, by passing all of our costs on to them.
So if I could ask a question, it seems to me that there's 2 separate issues. Number one is we have a finance problem that's substantially limiting your ability to function now, but we also have a separate access issue that's a separate issue that we probably need to deal with separately.
Yeah, I think so. And when Representative Thomas introduced the bill, she pointed out that there are 5 pharmacies in her town of Merrimack. And I think all of us know if we get a prescription for something, we don't have to drive 45 minutes to the pharmacy to get it. So patients will tell you that's an issue. As for the political aspects of it, the governor's never commented on this, so I have no idea what her position might be. But this bill has passed the House with 2/3. It has passed the Senate with 2/3 in the past. If the legislature's support for this is overwhelming, I would like to think the governor would come to the table.
Actually, you raised a question that I had before. So I didn't do my due diligence and look at every bill that's been submitted on this subject in the past, but is this bill very similar to the previous bills?
It is very similar, not identical, but similar.
I'm sorry, Mr. Last.
It's not identical, but it is similar.
Okay.
I want to make sure that Brandon and Keenan get an opportunity
Sure.
to, so I'm going to
Any
sit
other
down.
question?
Oh,
Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Brandon Pollock. I fairly recently became and volunteered for the chair of the board for Temescal Wellness, which is one of the ATCs, one of the 3. We manufacture products in Dover and have dispensaries in Lebanon, Keene, and So Lebanon, Keene, Dover is our dispensaries, manufacturer Manchester. I think essentially from our perspective, as has been discussed, this is a barrier to financing. And I think practically, pragmatically, this issue here is one that has faced a lot of states over the years. Most medical marijuana programs started with requiring their organizations to be nonprofits, including Massachusetts and Maine. As of today, it's just New Hampshire and Arizona that are left still requiring these organizations to be nonprofits. And what we've realized over the years is we operate as a business. We run payroll, we manufacture goods, we transport our products, and we dispense products to our patients in a retail environment. So we're not operating as a charity in the conventional sense. We're not eligible for any grant funding. We're not eligible for any donations. No one's supporting this from a charitable perspective. We're required to take in revenue and pay our team and pay our rent and operate as a business. However, being structured as a nonprofit reduces our ability in a material way to raise funds. Temescal's situation right now is it had taken out a lot of debt to get going at very high interest rates, very high, similar to credit card interest rates. And continuing to pay that debt is a significant burden for the organization. If this legislation makes it all the way through, as it sounds like it's gotten quite close several times, that would give the organization flexibility to look for more conventional business financing and retire that debt load. We also in our position where we've talked with our regulator and we have support to open another access point. As we were just talking about, we have a dispensary that we still could open, but we can't raise the money for it right now. So that would, I think, be an immediate positive benefit to something like this, is having some financial flexibility like any other pharmacy could in New Hampshire to open somewhere else along perhaps the Seacoast region where we have patients driving all the way from, Hampton Beach up to Dover. But right now there's just no cash flow to support it. And the market for debt with interest rates going up has actually gotten even worse since we first did fundraising. So to address the concern that this will, I guess, change the perception and the visibility of medical marijuana in New Hampshire and create sort of big organizations. First, as has been noted, there's no ability for other companies to enter the market here. It's a very small medical marijuana market with 3 companies established by statute at this point. So that's not realistic to have new companies come in with a profit motive and start potentially creating a different environment. And then for the existing companies, it's more of a technical corporate change. It's not going to dramatically change the way that we operate or our motives. Our motives today are to operate as a business. We're trying to run a lean operation. We're trying to serve as many customers as possible. The fact of the matter is most of our potential customers, our patients, go to Maine or Vermont right now because our prices are so high, because we have this debt we're trying to pay off, because we can't operate like a conventional business. So I think practically speaking, allowing us to operate as a cannabis organization that would not have these restrictions without any of the benefits of a nonprofit. We're not a 501c3. We're not allowed to be recognized at the state or the federal level for any tax advantages of being a nonprofit. So I'll pause there. I feel like I've been talking more than normal. And yeah, happy to answer any questions.
So you mentioned that other states started with the nonprofit model and transitioned to a for-profit model. I will ask you and anybody else who wants to comment on it later, what has been the experience in those states following that transition from nonprofit to for-profit?
Sure. So my main company is called Theory Wellness. We started in Massachusetts. Now we're in 6 other markets. We started as a nonprofit under the medical marijuana program in Massachusetts. We converted when the state law allowed us and our colleagues to convert in 2019 to a conventional corporation. And essentially that allowed us to convert our debt that was on the books into equity, which is what our initial lenders were totally fine with. They wanted to have an opportunity to realize success long term. And that allowed us to invest in more access points and grow the organization. It also allowed a lot less complexity on the accounting side of trying to account as a nonprofit when you're not actually a nonprofit. You have to operate as a business. So we have personal experience. It's more of a corporate matter. It doesn't change any of the employees or any of our SOPs, any of our interactions with the regulators. It's really sort of corporate restructuring that is lawyers do okay on, and we are able to just become a little more normal. That's what we've been asking for all the time with this industry.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So you also mentioned that there are a lot of patients that go to neighboring states. I imagine that there are probably also a lot of patients who simply rely on street product, which is not tested or regulated in any way. So do you envision that this would potentially expand access? I mean, I imagine that this would expand access to cannabis through the ATCs and therefore would lower the incidence of people sort of resorting to buying cannabis on the street.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
I can assure you, with lower pricing, which would come through this legislation, more patients in a material way would stay within the program as intended. It's simply economic incentive. If prices are higher at dispensaries and they can buy from their friend or from Maine, a lot of folks are going to make that decision, especially these days, to not shop with us. But if we can lower pricing, which we could, if we could reduce this debt load, absolutely more patients will stay within the program as intended.
I feel like I can comment on that from my past experience, but we do an awful lot of counseling with patients that get on street product, and their answer why they do it is exactly what you said. I mean, we're not competitive with the marketplace, and the marketplace does include the street vendors. And we constantly in counseling say, these are the risks that you're facing. They said, yeah, but this is all the money I got. And it helps me a lot, and this is what I do. And now that we're getting, one of my friends works for NIH, and they're looking at, fentanyl and other cannabis laced with all sorts of other things. And he asked me, do we have a problem with that up here? And I don't know for sure, but if we don't, we will. And so, these are really, really big public safety considerations. And I just, the price has been a problem from day one. Does anybody else have a question? Because I have one more, but you said, I'm sorry. You said you volunteered as
Well,
a chair?
the board, it's a volunteer position on the board at Temescal Wellness, one of the state ATCs. Yeah. I don't get paid. We have our other organization, which is supporting Temescal, but yeah, I'm volunteering on this position. Yeah.
So just following up on the question I asked before about other states' experiences, have you seen any incidents of, this is a subjective question, but have you seen any incidents of companies with, or individuals or companies with incentives that perhaps don't align with yours, or purely profit oriented, come in and attempt to take over or make offers or try to seize that opportunity in other states?
Yeah. My response to that is that if there's going to be this sort of change is really a corporate change for the 3 existing organizations that are here. In this bill, there's no ownership changes allowed or contemplated for, I think, at least 3 years. That being said, the real the real way that a organization in a state like New Hampshire or any other cannabis market sort of has to operate and how its protocols run is a function of the regulations that control these entities. And this legislation doesn't change any of the overarching regulations that underpin the medical marijuana program in New Hampshire. So we, by switching from a nonprofit to a for-profit on the corporate back end, it doesn't mean all of a sudden we can start advertising aggressively, because we're not allowed to do that anyway. So I would suggest that while it's a fair point, but right now we are operating in a way that we're trying to maximize profit in a technical sense, where we're trying to keep this organization afloat and serve as many patients as we can, knowing that most of them are still leaving the state, while also trying to reduce our utility costs by upgrading our lighting with LED lights, which we just did in Manchester, things like that. So we're sort of already operating in a business sense. And I don't expect, because the regulations aren't changing, I don't expect behaviors from a public-facing perspective of any organization to change.
I have a question. I want to understand what this means. So, if this bill passes, what it would prevent for 3 years was the sale of membership or shares to a foreign corporation. I just want to understand what that meant. And I will also add in the caveat that I like is that 2/3 of the members still have to be New Hampshire residents. But what exactly is a foreign corporation?
Foreign corporation, foreign, if you consider New Hampshire domestic, foreign would be an out-of-state entity. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. That would also count as, yeah. Yep.
I actually have one other related question. My understanding is most of the ATCs in this state now, and I may be wrong, but started as an out-of-state entity that became an in-state entity. Am I wrong about that? Because like Temescal, I know
Right.
you came from another state, but you had to create your own
Right. Well,
in-state entity,
they
correct?
actually, I mean, the gentlemen behind us, they're 100% independent, just New Hampshire based. Temescal started in New Hampshire, and then one of the founders actually branched out and went into Massachusetts. Sanctuary, same thing. They started in New Hampshire. Now they have other operations in Massachusetts and Florida, but they everything was actually started here, which is pretty interesting,
Yeah,
as
it is
one of the
interesting.
first programs on the East Coast.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Yep. Sure. Yeah. I do. Yes. Or I did. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
Oh, mic's already on. Representative Kofal, Representative Nagel, Representative Woods, I really thank you all for taking the time today to talk with us about HB 54. This means a lot to me personally, so I really, really appreciate it. I come before you today. Oh yeah, thank you very much. My name is Keenan Blum. I come here before you today representing Granite Leaf Cannabis, formerly known as Prime Alternative Treatment Centers. But I don't come before you just as that. I also have spent nearly the last decade working full-time and giving everything I have to make sure that this program is effective and that we serve the patients of New Hampshire effectively. I started as a technician 9 years ago at the Merrimack Dispensary when it first opened, or a little bit before that. And while I did a variety of things there, from working the counter, doing inventory, handling those things, I spent a lot of my time working one-on-one with patients, performing free 1-hour consultations, and then following up with them over the preceding weeks and months to make sure that they achieved good results with therapeutic cannabis, and if it was at all possible, that they improved their lives with it. It didn't help everyone, but it helped the majority of the people we saw. And for some, it was amazing in the results they achieved. And it has driven me to continue working on this as hard as I do. We are a company of 45 people. All of us live in New Hampshire. And we have 3 facilities, a production facility out in Peterborough and dispensaries in Merrimack and Chichester. During that time that I worked with patients, most of them early on, especially, most of them had either cancer, multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease, spinal stenosis, or another debilitating condition. After working with them, many of them told me that they basically got their lives back. They were able to spend time with their family again, their grandchildren, or to participate in their community again, or just to function, to be able to get around without as extreme of pain. So this means a lot to me. And it's really important that we continue our mission. About 4 years ago, I was elected by our volunteer board as the CEO. So I've taken over that role. And every week we encounter obstacles to function effectively. I am consistently asked, as we try to improve our operations, improve our equipment, find economies of scale so that we're able to, as Brandon talked about, compete with out-of-state businesses, but more so make sure that our patients can access the medicine they need at prices that are affordable to them, and they don't turn to other less reputable or less caring sources for that. We provide a lot more than just the products themselves. However, I am consistently asked by whether it be equipment vendors or we haven't acquired financing in a very long time, because they all ask me for a personal guarantee. I am not an owner of this business. I have no equity. I have signed those forms because I want us to complete our mission and fulfill what we're supposed to do. But I feel it's onerous, and it's really a challenge for myself when, especially when, we look at trying to improve something large like more efficient lighting that reduces electrical and HVAC costs, when I have to sign something saying, yes, we'll owe you these hundreds of thousands of dollars for equipment, and I'm putting my own house on the line to do so. So in the last 4 years, we have worked really hard to lower our prices in the time I've been CEO. Our biggest category, which is cannabis flower, we've reduced by 30 to 40%, depending on the SKU, over the last 4 years in the cost that we charge patients. However, over the border, for example, in Maine, there are little to no regulations or requirements, and it is very, very hard for us to compete with those prices and keep New Hampshire patients shopping in New Hampshire, keeping their money in the economy here, and allowing us to have the income to function well, to handle everything we need to do, to pay our staff and provide good jobs. So all of that has been a huge challenge. Our patients expect better, and we want to do better. We're giving this everything we've got, but trying to run a business that really matches a for-profit model that is a manufacturer and retailer of goods and is already extremely complex due to the requirements of the federal government, the illegality of it at a federal level, is extremely challenging. And it was only compounded by this requirement that we meet nonprofit requirements in New Hampshire, report to the charitable trust unit, and do things in that fashion when none of the paperwork that I'm expected to fill out matches. I have to explain constantly what we do with donations. Why do we not have that? Where's our revenue coming from? And when we try to work with vendors, if I say we're a nonprofit to try to acquire something, they say, well, where's your 501c3 paperwork? And I say, we don't have that. And they say, well, then who's your owner? And I say, well, we don't have that either. So again, I end up trying to personally guarantee something with which I have no equity. So each one of these steps increases costs. With no personal guarantee, everyone expects a higher interest rate on anything we do acquire. And currently, in order to make the improvements we're looking at, improve our laboratory, improve our lighting, renovate our dispensary, or improve those things, we need a loan. And we cannot acquire one without a personal guarantee. I have not found anyone that'll do it unless you give them management control over the entity to ensure that they get their money back. And that then even further actually opens things up to for-profit interests rather than a situation where those of us that work really hard for this have some stake and a reason to be able to personally guarantee items, or if really needed, to acquire investors so that we can make improvements before having to acquire the revenue from patients to make the improvement. We can make it first and have patients benefit and enjoy those economies of scale or improve pieces of equipment. So that is our goal. And I can continue to explain, this is the life. I live it every day. We're trying to accomplish it, but I don't want to go on with further detail. If you have any questions, I'd be very happy to answer them.
No, I was just going to say thank you because I think everything you said has sort of added some depth to what we've heard before, so it is very helpful.
Thank you, Representative.
I think the experiment in New Hampshire has been very interesting. I do appreciate the regulation in the sense that we get a quality product, and I think maybe it's a sad statement that other states don't really do that. I do think the baby steps approach to doing this probably made sense. I think to answer your concerns, there's a statutory problem that limits the number of dispensaries that we can have, and that may be a separate issue that we may want to deal with. But this is one of the steps towards making a more efficient model that allows us better access and be more competitive with the black market as well as our neighboring states.
Yeah, I certainly can't disagree. Thank you. And we're a very small company, just for context. We have under 5,000 square feet of canopy, whereas a number of companies in Massachusetts, for example, have 100,000 square feet of canopy just for that single company alone. So as a group of 45, we're really making things at very small scale, hand making things. But there are times where, we're hand counting, say, fruit chews into containers, another company has a counter that just puts 20 into each bag. And so these things are extremely challenging for us. And it's hard for us to make these investments to have the competitive improvements so that New Hampshire has a program that we can stand on and be proud of. We want to become a company that New Hampshire patients, New Hampshire residents can be proud of having in the state, that represent us well. But it is really hard to do it with our hands somewhat tied in certain areas. And we love the mission and the idea behind the nonprofit intent. The actual practical application of it is extremely challenging.
So I also wanted to point out one thing that you said very early in your early experience. It's very unique to New Hampshire. That's really important. That does have a cost. The medical expertise on cannabis certification oversight is extremely limited. I think a lot of the docs that certify, and including me, don't have the knowledge base that we really need. And we really rely on what you guys do with your patient education, which is really important. And I'm not sure every other state does that, not to the level that you guys do it. And that's got a cost too, that we really should be proud that we do that. Because in some states you just walk in, grab some stuff and leave. I mean, you don't do it that way. And that's really needs to be pointed out.
It is, and that's an extremely frustrating thing for us, because when the cost is compared by, a unit of an edible or an amount of flour. And the reality is that's not the entirety of the services we provide. Even today, we employ a full-time educator on staff. Out of our 45 people, we have a full-time and a part-time. And we offer still hour-long consultations for free for any patient that wants it, whether they shop with us or not. And we will continue to do that regardless. We've found that I've just seen it make improvements to people's lives. And the idea of passing that on that opportunity is something I would never want to do. However, we want to have patients come through our doors to offer them that service, rather than thinking, I'll save some money, move my funds out of state, but acquire cheaper cannabis, and the long-term detriment that they're less likely to find what really helps them with their symptoms and conditions. A lot of what we recommend isn't a higher dose or more sales or them consuming more. It's very specifically targeting the particular thing they might need, which surprisingly often is, say, non-intoxicating THCA as an anti-inflammatory, not something that, reduces their, immediate mental capacity to function or something else. It's something that allows them to participate and function more effectively.
Just as you or perhaps anybody else reviews this, do you see any sort of, loopholes that would allow some big corporation to move in and be a player? Or is this protective of the current status?
I don't necessarily see any loopholes. I think at the moment, and for the foreseeable future, this program in a small state is small enough that there isn't a huge amount of incentive or much incentive for a large corporation to be involved in that type of situation. There certainly is a little bit of revenue to be had and potentially, profit, so to speak, but we're not talking anything hugely substantial. We have 15,000 total customers available to us in the state at this time. So when you kind of think about what a individual might spend, we're not talking hundreds of millions of dollars here.
So, in terms of the law itself, you don't see any loopholes that, that's the main concern.
No, but I don't think I do. But I do appreciate your viewpoint on it. And that's certainly a perspective that I think I appreciate you taking and that we're happy to collaborate on, is just making sure that this doesn't have any loopholes or a situation that brings us to a bad place. I don't want to have cannabis in New Hampshire become a profit-making machine that takes advantage of New Hampshire patients. I think that would be the worst result, or one of the worst results we could possibly have. So I think guardrails that ensure that doesn't happen are completely reasonable. However, I don't think that the solution there is to require nonprofit status in New Hampshire when it's not available federally. There's no benefit to that. That makes it harder. But I do very much respect and appreciate the intention that you have of that question and the goal that's there. I think that's something that it's extremely important that we maintain. And I don't know if I can offer a solution at this moment, but I think it's something we should work on.
I mean, I think there is an answer to that. I mean, 126X7 still oversees who can buy in this state, so there's still a lot of state oversight. Am I correct? I'm looking at you because you know the law. You guys know the law, really. He's looking behind you. But yeah, I mean, my understanding is that none of that goes away. There's still a lot of oversight as to who can buy in this state. That doesn't change. So that would limit what it seems to me the guardrail's already in place.
And I think the foreign corporation guardrail is probably the largest. There's a period of time and expectation and limitations to when and who it could be sold for. I think making sure that any essentially profits or benefits that are provided from this program go to the patients of New Hampshire or to those doing the work and who live in New Hampshire and are contributing to our economy and keeping things going in that regard. I think as long as we are accomplishing those goals, then this would be a really positive bill for the people of New Hampshire, and certainly for us and certainly for our patients.
Thanks. All set? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So we only have minutes left. I'm not sure our obligation is to make some sort of a recommendation. We have an option of either doing that now or doing it on another day.
Well, I wonder if you want to ask if there's anybody else here
Oh,
who
I'm
would
sorry.
like to
Thank you. Is there
say anything.
Yes, go ahead, sorry. Do we have a time limit?
Well, we're supposed to be over downstairs in 10 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Ignore what I just said about time.
Hi there. Oh, this works. Good.
Thank you.
My name's Nathaniel Gurian. I live in Sandwich, New Hampshire. I just thought I'd give you to speak to you as a certified medical cannabis patient and my own experience. When I first was certified as a patient several years ago, I was very happy to visit one of the sanctuary ATCs. This one was in Conway. Conway and Plymouth. Both sanctuary ATCs are about equidistant from me, but I tend to shop a little bit more in the Conway area. And I visited them, and they were very helpful in recommending the right products for me. And I made my purchase, and that is, other than stopping in to say hello, it was the last time I actually went there, because literally 5 miles away across the border in Freiburg, they have medical cannabis dispensaries, 5 of them actually, and the one that's actually closest to Conway basically sells pretty much the same product for half the price. And I have to tell you that I'm a very great supporter of the ATC and therapeutic cannabis program in New Hampshire, and I really, really, really would like to support my local dispensaries. And frankly, even if the dispensary was 20% more expensive, I would support them. But 100% more expensive is just not economical for me, and that has been my experience. And I think that that's unfortunate, and I think that that this particular bill would go a long way to helping the ATCs be more competitive.
Again, that's very helpful. I've written down the pricing information you gave me, because I think that that plays into this in a very important way. So
Thank you.
Yeah, that was really important. Thanks. I'm sorry, I almost neglected you. Any,
A last statement.
sure.
Again, for the record, Wendy Thomas from the town of Merrimack. I have heard very clearly that there's an appetite, a possible appetite for opening up more dispensaries. Just letting you know that I'm going to look into that and get on that, get on top of that. But it would depend and it would rely on this bill passing. Thank you.
That was really important you said that, because of the experience with Temescal not being able to open up a new facility because they can't finance it.
Exactly.
And that's a big problem. Thank you.
Exactly. And Matt referenced it, but when I testify, I always say 5 pharmacies in my town. If I need pain relief, I'm not more than 10 minutes away from it, and there's some people in the state that have to travel over an hour to get to their dispensaries to get their medicine. And this is medicine. We're not talking, we're not talking adult use. This is medicine for patients. Thank you.
You can say who you are.
For the record, my name is Michael Holt. I'm the administrator of the Therapeutic Cannabis Program with the Department of Health and Human Services. Department doesn't have a position on the bill. I don't have any, proactive statements, but I do want to be a resource to this subcommittee if that is possible.
I'm just going to ask, oh, go ahead. You go ahead. You're smart.
I was going to ask you the same question. As the bill that stands, do you see any change, any difficulties, any loopholes in terms of making this still a secure endeavor in the state?
The bill doesn't change any of the
I just wanted
state regulations or the state's authority to regulate these entities. We've not heard any specific concerns from this government or this governor or this committee. It's hard to assure that there are no loopholes when I don't know what the loophole is that we're concerned about. We can go back to looking at the governor's past vetoes. I just looked up the most recent one of the recent ones from 2021, and his concern was that it would unfairly position these 3 companies if and when legalization would happen. It would guarantee them, these 3 companies, a monopoly on the legalization services. I don't know if I don't see that as being necessarily true, as we've seen, legislation in the past has restricted ATC's access to the legalization market.
But as far as just addressing what this bill does, I just wanted to clarify, And I assume the answer would be no, there is no loopholes in terms of security issues.
That is true. I can offer, a full quarter of, so there's 15,000 patients in the program. A full quarter of them have never been to a dispensary in last year in 24. On a quarterly basis, less than half go to a dispensary. So when we hear talk about the revenue coming in from those 15,000 patients, it is a small subset of those patients. And again, most of them are going to Maine. We know that. They tell us that. They tell the program that every day because it's far cheaper. What they don't know is that the medical marijuana in Maine is not regulated. So there's no requirements for testing, pesticide control, et cetera. That's a real problem in terms of quality and safety, inhaling heavy metals, et cetera. There's no regulation of the medical program in Maine.
So if I may, I think we're kind of winding down to the end of our time here. I don't think we're required to come back with a recommendation. I will offer my opinion, and if the rest of the subcommittee wants to tends to agree with me, then I think we can come back with a recommendation. Although I remain wary of this combination of high regulation plus profit motive, I think that there are some of what I've learned is that there are pretty strong guardrails in place, and B, that short of sort of creeping changes to those, there's really not room for big cannabis to swoop in and sort of bastardize the market and the services that are being provided. At the same time, I'm hearing potential safety issues with people buying street marijuana. Price is too high, access is limited, expansion of ATCs is limited. I have heard outside of this that the survival of ATCs may be at risk. So I guess, what I'm coming away with is that I think that the actual real world problems are significantly larger than my concerns, although I still have some concerns. I guess my instinct at this point is to support OTP on this bill.
I would do the same. My take is that the guardrails are clearly intact. And it's what we're hearing, the quality, which is really what we want. We're taking care of patients, and the quality remains. And we've heard the difference between Maine and here, and that's sad to hear there's that much difference, but I guess that's the way it is. But with the guardrails in place, some of the issues that you raised, the availability and competing with the street folks that may be subjected to fentanyl, that may be addressed if they have the ability with this bill to change their financing. And I have seen that, and I'll offer, I was on Temescal's board before I got in the legislature and saw this firsthand and the constraints that it does impose. So I think it would answer some, not all, but it would go a part way. And I think it's the kind of step, it's a graduated step, it's a protected step, and it's aimed in the right direction. And I think it would be, we would be remiss not to take the step, given the fact that it is protected in that way. But I will just offer another comment. I do have some concerns. It is still categorized as a illegal drug. There are motions in place The DOJ has been held in abeyance basically by presidential order. That could change, and that would be a absolute unmitigated disaster. I'm not trying to be a dark cloud, but I do have some concerns with the current milieu, drugs being such a high-profile item in political discussions, that this could trickle down, especially with a complete a redo of DOJ. I'm just a little bit nervous. I'll make a motion not to pass.
I will second.
All in favor? Do we need a roll call? Oh, sorry. Do we need a roll call? No.
I-
All in favor?
Unanimous.
I think we are in agreement. Thank you.
This was really wonderful. I'm glad we did this. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, everybody, for making the trip here. It has been helpful. I have learned a lot from the past hour, so appreciate it.